I stood in front of the club in a state of shock. Linda left me for the night to have sex with Mark Lavalier, a football superstar from our local Sharks team. I didn't know what to do. I knew our marriage was over and that I could never forgive her for the humiliation she had caused me. Dozens of people filmed the event, and it will be online by morning. What was she thinking? Did she really believe that I would forgive her and everything would go back to normal when she returned home? A big surprise awaited her. I returned to the hotel where we were to spend our special evening and went to our room. A plan was slowly forming in my head, and it was not a pleasant one. As soon as I walked into the room, the first thing I saw was the nightdress she bought from Victoria's Secret for our special evening. As soon as I saw him, I burst into tears. The whole night crashed down on me, and I collapsed on the bed, sobbing. My wife, the love of my life, my stronghold to whom I returned every day, the mother of my children, the woman I loved more than life itself, betrayed me for one night of sex. I lay there crying over the loss of my marriage, and I don't know how long it lasted until I remembered a voice from my time in the army that said, "Get up, control yourself, and do what you need to do to survive." I stood up, ashamed of my weakness. I was better than that. I wouldn't have survived 6 weeks of being held captive by the Taliban, crying and feeling sorry for myself. I packed all my things into a suitcase, leaving Linda's things in the room, and went home. I stopped by the Goodsons to pick up their children, Tommy, 13, and Gail, 15. They had just gone to bed, but had not yet fallen asleep. I told them to get dressed and pack their things. I'm taking them home. May Goodson asked where Linda was. I decided not to make up stories and told her the truth. I didn't know where she was. She left me and went with another man. May was outraged and said this, then asked what I was going to do next. I said I hadn't decided yet, although that was a lie. I knew exactly what I was going to do. It all depended on when Linda returned. When we got to the house, it didn't feel like home anymore. I told the kids to pack their bags for 2 weeks. When they asked why and where Mom was, I told them the truth. Your mother decided to leave with another man who she likes more than me, and I don't know when or if she'll come back. Sorry, but I think you are old enough to know the truth. Tommy began to cry, and Gail hugged him and held him close. Then she looked at me and said, "Are you going to divorce your mother? I don't see any other way out, do you see? Dad, if you divorce her, then that's what she needs. She clearly wasn't thinking about Tommy and me when she left you from the mouths of babies. I was so proud of Gail at that moment, so if you get divorced, I want to stay with you." Tommy stopped crying and said, "I also want to live with you, Dad. Mom doesn't love us anymore, otherwise she wouldn't have left." I hugged them both and said, "I'm sure your mother loves you very much, but she didn't think about it when she left." Gail asked, "Where are we going, Dad?" "We will go to visit my Uncle Jules. I'll tell you more later. Right now, I have something to do, so if you can help Tommy get ready, I'll be in my office." I had a few things that needed to be done first to protect myself financially. I went to our bank, paid off and canceled our credit cards, and transferred all of our savings into a joint account. I had my own personal account that I used for birthdays, Christmas, anniversaries, and her surprise cruise that I was planning. I transferred all but $20,000 into my account, which will last Linda a couple of months while she finds a job. I wrote a will leaving Linda's sole ownership of the house and its contents. I canceled Linda's country club and gym membership. I then went on Linda's social media one by one to explain why I left her. I recorded Linda dancing with that bastard and added it to her page. While I was doing this, I discovered that I had accidentally left the recording function on and recorded the entire episode up until I left the club. The recording was audio only since I had my phone in my pocket, but it was very incriminating evidence, so I added it to her page as well. I then sent the post to everyone on her contact list, including her parents and sister. I added a short message. "This is why I left Linda." I also sent the entire package to the local newspaper and the late-night show celebrities behaving badly. I got a call from the show organizer almost immediately asking if I could prove any of this. I sent him the video and told him that Linda was with Mark now. He asked if I would like to be a guest on his show, but I declined, saying I was leaving the country, but he could contact me by email, and I gave him my address. Then I called my Uncle Jules in France, told him what happened, and asked if we could stay with him for a while. He said he was very sorry that Linda did what she did, and that we would be welcome as long as we wanted. My next call was difficult. I called my boss at home. I was offered the position of production manager at our French plant, since the current boss was about to retire. I thanked my boss, but declined, not wanting to uproot my family. Now I'm wondering if I can change my mind. I speak French fluently as my mother was French and my father English, and I have dual citizenship. I have both a British and French passport, so this will be easy. The boss picked up on the fourth ring and said, "I hope this is important." I told him the whole story and asked if the position was still vacant. He said he was very sorry for what Linda did and assured me that the position was mine. I explained what I was going to do, and he agreed to give me a month off before starting my new position. I said I would contact him and hung up. I then opened the safe and took out our passports, our children's birth certificates, and the $5,000 I kept there in case of an emergency. I also took all my army photos off the walls of my office, took them out of their frames, and packed them up to take with me. The next step was the most difficult. I asked the children to write a letter to their mother, telling her how much they loved her and that they would get in touch soon. Then I sat down and wrote her a short letter. "Linda, last night you showed how much you love me by walking off with your hero and leaving me looking like a ridiculous loser in front of all your friends. I say your friends because they all supported your game and helped you escape. I've never felt pain like I did last night, and I can never forgive you for that. I'd say I'm a broken man, but you know me well enough to know that I'll just get back on my feet and start my life again without you. I took the children with me because it's obvious you weren't thinking about them when you left with your lover, so you won't miss them now. I told them a watered-down version of what you did because I won't be the bad guy in all of this. I asked the children to write you a farewell letter. I do not know the real contents of their letters since I asked them to seal the envelopes. I told the children that you love them and they will contact you when we get settled. I hope that in time you will understand what you did to me and the children and regret it. I strongly advise you to see a psychologist to find out what is wrong with you. Dee said I should forgive you because it was just one night and he was famous, and if she were you, she would have done the same. This proves that you are not the only woman of easy virtue in the group. Regarding your statements, I'll be home in the morning as if nothing had happened, and we will continue as usual, that you and Dee were using something. My advice, ask for help finding a new person, forget about us, and move on with your life. I intend to do the same. I'm not mad at you, just disappointed. I thought we were forever. I guess I was wrong. I obviously loved you more than you loved me because I could never do this to you, but you don't feel the same way about me. Don't worry about the kids. I'll take care of them as they come first for me, but it seems not for you. I will ensure that they communicate with you regularly to keep you updated on their progress. I took most of our money to start a new life, so you'll have to find some work. I gave you the house. You should have enough capital to buy a small apartment in a good area. One more thing. It might be a good idea to ditch your so-called friends because without their help, we would still be together. Just think about it. Goodbye. James. I finished packing and was about to leave when my phone rang with a message from Linda. My heart would beat faster if she realized what she had done and wanted to take him away. God, I hoped so. If she didn't have sex with him, there was still a chance for our marriage. I opened the text and my heart sank. It was crap. "Hey dude, I just had sex with your wife." Attachment. With trembling hands, I opened the attachment and saw the details of their evening, and the screen went dark. I sat in my office and cried my eyes out. While I was sitting there, Tommy and Gail came over and hugged me. "Don't cry, Daddy. We still love you." I sent them to the common room and then sent the text and attachment to everyone who sent the email earlier. I opened the email again and added PS. "I see you didn't use protection last night, So if you remember, 11 years ago, I had a procedure done so that you can get pregnant from your lover since it is your auspicious time of the month. So you can take your pill the next morning and get tested for illnesses. What were you thinking? Yeah, and by the way, you might want to look at the message and attachment your crush sent me on your phone. In case he deleted it, I put it on your laptop. James, when I had recovered enough, I looked for flights to Charles de Gaulle. One flight was in 4 hours, so I booked 3 seats in first class, and we were on our way. It was an hour-and-a-half drive to the airport, and the kids fell asleep almost immediately. At least for that I was grateful. I parked in the long-term parking lot, and we took the bus to our departure point. I left the car keys at the reception for my boss to pick them up later. It was a company car. I left a message on the company answering machine because I didn't want to bother him again. The children were in a bad mood when we arrived at our seats and immediately fell asleep. I sat and thought about what I could do to avoid a train wreck and realized that this or something similar was bound to happen since Linda was clearly open to an affair. Then it occurred to me that perhaps this was not her first time, and were the children even mine. I called my uncle, and he assured me that I would be met upon arrival. Then an evil thought occurred to me, and I scoured the internet to find Mark's cell phone number of all the places I found it on his Facebook page. I sent him a message. Thank you so much for sending proof of my soon-to-be ex-wife's infidelity and for exposing her as the lying, cheating prostitute that she really is. I thank you from the bottom of my heart for taking her home with you. I could have spent many years with her before I discovered her true nature. If we ever meet, I'd like to shake your hand and buy you a beer. Thank you very much again. James. I reread my message and chuckled. I'm sure this will really piss him off because it turns him on to make cuckolds out of husbands. I was also sure that he would show this to Linda and she would burst a blood vessel, so I settled into my seat and fell asleep. I woke up to the flight attendant telling me to buckle up. We were about to land. I checked the children, but they were already wearing seat belts. I slept well on the road, feeling rested and ready to face an uncertain future. We disembarked the plane and went to baggage claim to collect our suitcases, went through passport control, and headed to the arrivals hall. As we emerged from the arrival tunnel, I saw a man in a chauffeur's uniform holding a sign with my name on it. We walked up and introduced ourselves, and he walked us to the limo and put our luggage in the back seat. He said his name was Paul and asked if we were hungry since it was a 2-hour drive to my uncle's castle. I found myself really hungry, and so were the kids. I think Paul must have had children because he took us to McDonald's, much to the children's delight. Linda. I woke up to sunlight streaming through the window, and at first I wondered where I was. The room was strange, and when I looked at the man lying next to me, the whole night came back. Lying next to me was the Greek god Mark Lavalier. I remembered the night of passion. We had sex again. I sighed. It was time to go home and face the music. I couldn't believe what I had done last night, leaving Jim like that, but Dee assured me that he would forgive me in a few days. Dave eventually forgave Dee when she lost her way, and admittedly, she had to give Dave a hall pass to do the same to even things out. I was ready to do the same because the night was worth it. I knew that Mark had ruined me. Making love with Jim would never be the same as making love with Mark, and I would always compare them in my mind. I still loved Jim as always and wanted to grow old with him. He just needed to understand that it was just a one-time thing and get over it. I took a shower, got dressed, and went downstairs. Mark made us breakfast waffles with bacon and coffee. We ate in almost silence, and having finished drinking coffee, I said that it was time for me to go home. Mark extended his hand to help me up and pulled me into his arms, kissing me. We had sex again. After that, I said that I needed to take a shower again. He said that he had an appointment and that he needed to leave right away. He then added, "By the way, I promised your cuckold I would send him a gift home." He grinned and led me out the door to put me in his luxury sports car. I was shocked by his words. Last night and this morning, he didn't show disrespect to Jim, but now that I was leaving, he had turned into a rude bully. As we left the house, I noticed a crowd of people at the gate and at least 2 television crews. They shouted things like, "Mark, Is this your new girlfriend? Did you know she's married? Do you always go for married women? Linda, does your husband approve of you spending the night with Mark? This is the first time you've cheated on your husband. Are you going to see Mark again? I was shocked. How did they know my name? What will this do to my marriage when this is shown later today? The police were present and cleared the way for us to leave. Mark looked surprised and asked if I had told anyone where I was. I replied that I didn't tell anyone and I didn't know how they knew where I was. When we arrived at my house, reporters were also waiting there, but without the presence of the police to clear the way for us. Microphones were poked in our faces and similar questions were shouted again. All my neighbors were outside watching, and it didn't get any better when Mark helped me out of the car and kissed me in front of everyone. I ran to my front door and locked myself inside, slamming the door behind me. I saw some reporters looking in the windows, so I walked around the house, closing all the curtains and blinds. This was not at all how it should have been. Dee said I would have a wonderful night, and after Jim snorted a little and I calmed his wounded ego, he would forgive me and everything would be the same. While I was running around the house, I realized that Jim was not at home. On the one hand, I was glad because it gave me time to get cleaned up and change clothes so that Jim would not see what condition I was in. On the other hand, I had no idea where he was. I looked at my watch, almost 13 o'clock. Damn, I completely forgot about the kids. I was late picking them up. I looked out the window. It seemed that all the reporters were tired of waiting for my appearance and had dispersed. I went to the Goodsons and knocked on the door. Ron opened the door. Usually I would just walk into their house, but he almost closed the door on me. Ron, what do you want? I was a little offended that he talked to me like that. I came to pick up my children. Sorry, I'm late. I was detained. You mean you had sex with that football player and you forgot about your kids? You're a disgrace. Jim already took them. He knows what's important. Now get lost. Do you know where they are? Please, I'm begging you. No, and if I knew, I wouldn't say. And he slammed the door. I stood there in shock. Had my little novel already become public knowledge? I returned home and tried to collect my thoughts. At that moment, I saw my laptop on the table with Jim's wedding ring and 3 envelopes on it. I took the top envelope. It simply said, Linda. After reading Jim's note, my eyes misted over and I began to cry even more than I had when the puppy was hit by a car as a child. I opened my laptop and read the message Mark had sent Jim and thought things couldn't get any worse. But when I watched the tape, I had to run to the bathroom and throw up. I was in despair. Where were they? How could I fix everything if I didn't even know where they were? I took the next envelope and opened it. I learned that it was from Tommy by his crooked and untidy handwriting. Gail's letter was neat and beautiful. Letter to Tommy. Mom, Dad is taking us away because you don't love us anymore and you left with another man, making Dad cry. Why don't you love Daddy anymore? He still loves you, otherwise he wouldn't cry. Dad says you still love us, so we should love you too, but I'm not sure. If you loved us, you wouldn't have left with another man. Why did you do this? You broke my dad's heart, and I'm very angry at you. With love, Tommy. P.S. Gail helped me with spelling. I cried so hard after reading Tommy's letter that the paper got wet and the ink started to smudge. I put Tommy's letter aside and picked up Gail's letter. I was afraid to read it because she has always been a daddy's girl. I opened the letter with trembling fingers. Letter to Gail. Mom, I can't believe you did this to us. You always taught us that family comes first, but apparently not for you. You said that we should be faithful, honest, and always tell the truth. Were you faithful when you left your dad for another man? Were you honest when you said, I refuse all others? Were you truthful when you told Dad that you would only dance with him? The answer is no. You disrespected your dad, lied to him, and betrayed him. I no longer consider you my mother. My mother would never do such things, and since you are no longer my mother, I do not feel any obligation to love you. If Dad read this letter, he would be very angry with me. He told me that we should love you, since he is sure that you love us. But I don't believe in it anymore, otherwise you wouldn't have destroyed our family. I hope I never see you again. If you see me, don't talk to me as I will ignore you. I hope you live and die alone and rot in hell. You are the worst mother in the world. Gail. I was now lying on the floor, sobbing. I was in so much pain that I didn't hear the knock on the door. When it opened, my parents, Sam and Sarah, stood in front of me with angry faces. My father went into the kitchen, and my mother came up to me and helped me up onto the sofa. I looked at her, and bam, she hit me. Sarah, you stupid, stupid girl. How dare you do this to Jim? He's the best man I know besides your father. How could you humiliate him like that and become a woman of easy virtue for another man for one night? I thought, we raised you better. If it weren't for the children, we would have abandoned you, and that would have been right. But you are our daughter, so we will be by your side. Linda, how did you know what happened? Who told you? Jim sent the message and both videos to everyone you know, so everyone knows what you did. I wouldn't want to be in your shoes right now. Jim is very popular and loved by everyone. Do you know where he is now? No, I have no idea. I tried to call him, but they told me that my number was blocked. Mom and Dad also tried to call, but the result was the same. We called everyone we could, but everyone got the same answer. Jim cut off all ties to the past, and no one could reach him. Sarah, what came into you anyway? Why did you do that to him? Mom, it was Mark Lavalier. He came to our table and asked me to dance. Of all the women in the club, he chose me, and I went with him. Dee said, I knew it, damn Dee. How many times in your entire life, since elementary school, every time you got into trouble, Dee was there? Don't you ever learn? Dee said everything would be okay. Jim loves me enough to forgive me when I come back the next morning, and everything will go back to the way it was. Sam, baby, no man will ever forgive you for what you did. Dee is talking complete bullshit. If your mother pulled that off, I'd send them both into the ground. You should be grateful I'm not Jim. Sarah, we've done the best we can for now. I suggest you stay home as much as possible so that if Jim comes back, you'll be there, and keep your phone close. If you need anything, call. They left soon after, and I was left alone again. My phone rang, and I grabbed it, hoping it was Jim, but no, it was Dee. Hello, dear. How was your night? You're so happy. Tell me what he's like. I want to know all the details. Dee, stop it. Everything has gone wrong. Jim left, took the kids, and I don't know where they are. Don't worry, honey. He'll be back. He loves you. He's just sulking and worried that you hurt his ego. You've had the night of your life, so tell Aunt Dee everything. Not now, Dee. I need to fix my marriage. I regret ever listening to you. Now I may never see my children again. Don't put the blame on me. You're the one who decided to sleep with the football star. You could have said no, you know, so don't blame me. She was right. Of course I could have said no. I ended the call and sat waiting for a call from Jim. Jim. We arrived at Shadow Jules just in time for lunch. Jules was waiting for us when we got out of the car. Paul carried the luggage to the entrance and then went to park the car. Jules hugged me in typical French fashion and kissed me on both cheeks. I heard my children snort and couldn't help but smile. They'd have to get used to French customs. Jules then approached the children. Welcome to my home. Please make yourself at home. You are always welcome here, and I hope you enjoy your stay. He led us into a hallway that was larger than our house. I spent many happy summers here while my father served in the Marines around the world. The castle servants were standing in line, and Jules introduced them to us. Last in line was a strikingly beautiful woman of about 25, whom Jules called his personal secretary. In the USA, this is called a personal assistant. I immediately wondered how personal it really was. He introduced her to us as a vet and said that if we needed anything, she would arrange everything. Next was a plump woman of about 50 named Simone, who was the housekeeper and was responsible for our needs. But first, lunch. Jules showed us the dining room, which was at the back of the castle and opened onto a large terrace with a swimming pool. I saw my children's eyes light up when they saw the pool, and Jules noticed it too. Sorry, kids, but this pool is closed for the winter. The disappointment was clearly written on their faces. However, there is a small indoor pool, and you can see it later. I thought they would jump for joy. They were so delighted. They looked at me for permission, and I nodded in agreement. They ran to Jules and hugged him, thanking him. 5 of us ate lunch, including Yvette, who barely ate anything. Of course, being in France, lunch took the best part of 2 hours. After lunch, the children asked permission to swim in the pool. I said they didn't have swimsuits, but Yvette said it wasn't a problem and that she would stay with them for safety's sake. After they left, Jules and I took a bottle of his best red wine and 2 glasses and went to the solarium. So, Jim, tell me everything, holding nothing back. And I told him everything. By the end, I was crying like a child. I was ashamed. I wiped my tears and was glad that the children and Yvette did not see me in this state. Well, Jim, we French look at infidelity differently. Lovers and mistresses are almost the norm. But even so, what she did was unforgivable, even by our standards. You decided you were going with her. I'm going to leave her alone for a couple of weeks and then file for divorce. I can't do anything else except expose her lover for who he really is. Well, if there's anything I can do to help, just let me know. You and the kids can stay here as long as you like. I'm sure Simone will be happy to spoil them. By the way, I'll ask Yvette to find them a school with English-speaking teachers, if you don't mind. It would be a great help. I have a month before I start my new job, but I'll need to get to know the plant before then, and knowing the kids are safe and happy will make it a lot easier. We sat in silence. I drank and thought about the future, and Jules drank and smoked a thick cigar. When Tommy and Gail returned with Yvette, I was already slightly drunk, felt pleasantly warm, and was sure that everything would be fine. Tommy and Gail set off to explore the castle with orders to return in time for dinner. One of the maids showed me to my room and opened 2 adjacent doors to Tommy and Gail's rooms. I have been here many times, but the castle still impressed me with its size. Although it was called a castle, it was more like a small palace. Jules was old money and, as the eldest son, inherited everything. My mother received a sizable dowry and was expected to find a rich husband. Instead, she married my father, a lieutenant in the Royal Marines. They both died in a car accident when they were hit by a drunk truck driver on the way to my castle. I was 18 years old at the time and was about to go to university. After the funeral, I returned to England and joined the parachute regiment, where I served for the next 5 years. My inheritance was placed in a trust since I didn't need the money at the time. Until now, I have not touched these funds since my salary at work, where I worked as a production manager, was enough. I worked for one of the largest companies involved in the production of liquid injection systems, including fuels, lubricants, and paints. We have been the main suppliers of one of the leading car manufacturers in Germany using our high-quality product. Other car manufacturers have also used our cheaper products for the same purposes. My new job was to head the French division of the company as plant manager. The plant occupied more than 15 acres of land and employed more than 1,600 workers. My new salary was in the low 7 figures, which meant a nearly 60% increase in income. Before I officially start my duties, I have 3 months of work with the current manager, who is about to retire, but will be available for another 6 months if I have problems. I was lucky that Jules's castle is only an hour's drive from the factory in the direction from Paris, so traffic jams will not be a problem for me either in the morning or in the evening. Although this doesn't bother me much since I was provided with a driver who would pick me up in the morning and take me home in the evening. I wrote in my letter that I would make sure the children kept in touch with Linda, but decided to wait until next Sunday. I gave them both laptops and told them to call their mother and let them know they were okay. Tommy said he wanted to talk first, but Gail flatly refused to talk to Linda, saying she didn't want to talk to her anymore. Yvette and I tried to convince her, but she was adamant. I texted Linda to turn on her laptop because Tommy wanted to talk to her. I reminded Tommy not to reveal where we were and sent a message. Linda, it's been over a week since Jim took the kids and left. 2 days later, I went to the police and reported them missing. I was ushered into an interrogation room where I was joined by a motherly-looking female sergeant. I explained that my husband took the children and left, and I did not know where they were. She introduced herself as Sergeant Mary Malone, and then looked at me and asked if we had met before. I replied that, as far as I know, no, and the interrogation began. Are you afraid that your husband might harm the children? God, no, he loves them very much. More than anything in the world, he would never hurt them. Did he leave you a note explaining why he left? I took the note out of my bag and handed it to her, lowering my eyes in shame. She read the note and then seemed to read it again. She asked if she could make a copy, and I agreed. She left the room for a couple of minutes and then returned, returning the original note to me. Now I realize where I've seen you before. You're something of a celebrity. You were on Celebrities Behaving Badly last night. They did a report on Mark Lavilla, and you were the married woman he seduced. I felt hot tears of shame run down my cheeks and covered my face with my hands. You must think I'm a terrible person after what you saw. I'm not really like that. I don't know what came over me to do such a terrible thing to my husband. I need to find him and fix everything. Can you help me? Linda, I'm not here to judge you. My only concern is the safety of your children, and from what you said, they are not in danger, so I can't sound an alarm. The best I can do is to send an orientation with the note, "Do not detain." Have you or your husband filed for divorce? I don't know if Jim filed. Why is that important? If you're going through a divorce, one spouse can't take the kids to another state without the other spouse's permission. But since that's not the case, Jim has every right to take the kids wherever he wants, so my hands are tied. Guidance is the best thing I can do. If Jim contacts you in any way, please let me know so I can update your case. Then I was carefully taken out of the station. I kept my phone and laptop on and with me at all times, even taking them into the bathroom with me. I went to see a lawyer who told me the same thing as Sergeant Malone. But he also said that if I found Jim, he would try to get a court order compelling Jim to give me access to the children. I started following news about Mark Lavilla after the show. The phones were filled with angry calls from citizens renouncing Mark's and my low moral standards. Among the calls were several couples who said he did the same to them, and they were interviewed live. It turned out that he regularly targeted married women in front of their husbands and took pleasure in destroying their marriages by sending their husbands dirty descriptions of his sexual adventures along with video evidence. Most of his victims divorced, and at least one husband could not stand it and died. This caused an avalanche of calls from the public demanding that Mark be fired from the team. When sponsors began to pull out, Mark was kicked out of professional football and given a generous severance package. However, his problems did not end there, as the lawyer I visited quickly gathered all the victims, including me, and launched a class action lawsuit for intentional emotional damages. Mark was also arrested for videotaping women having sex without their consent. He was later released on bail and is awaiting trial. It was Sunday, and I had just finished lunch when the message arrived. It was from Jim. I opened it, expecting a stream of insults, but all it said was, "Turn on your laptop." The laptop was already turned on, so I opened it and the video call request appeared on the screen. I connected and almost cried when I saw Tommy's face. I could barely speak. "Hey baby, I missed you so much. How are you?" "Hey mom, I missed you too. Why did you leave dad and make him cry?" "Oh baby, I'm so sorry I did this, but this is an adult matter that I need to talk to daddy about. Can you call him?" "Sorry mom, dad said he didn't want to talk to you." "Ask dad to call me, please." "Where are you, baby? Tell me so I can come and see you. I miss you all so much." "Dad said I shouldn't tell, but we can call you every Sunday and talk." "Did you do anything interesting today? Tell me about your day." "Yes, it's great here. We have an indoor pool and huge bedrooms with double beds. We're going shopping tomorrow. Dad will take me and Yvette will take Gail." I took a deep breath. Who is Yvette, and why is she taking Gail shopping? Who is Yvette, dear? Oh, she takes care of everything and makes sure we have everything we need. She's very sweet. You'd really like her. I'm sure Daddy likes her. It was like boiling water was poured over me. Jim just left a week ago, and he's already hooked up with some French girl. I needed to know more. She must be very nice. What does she look like? She's almost as tall as Dad in heels and looks like those ladies in your magazines. She makes me laugh, tells me bedtime stories, and teaches me French. I really like her, and so does Gail. They often sit and talk about all sorts of things. Girly things. I felt my ears ringing with anger. Jim left, and now some French woman took my place in their lives. My imagination painted pictures of Yvette teaching my Jim the wrong words in French. I was shaking with jealousy and fear. She seems really nice. What did you do with her today? We went to the zoo and saw all sorts of animals, even bears, just like at home. Then Paul picked us up and took us to a very nice restaurant, and I played in the play corner. It was great. After dinner, we went back to Jules' house, and Gail and I went swimming while Dad watched. I had to go to bed first because Gail is older and can go to bed later, but I didn't feel bad because Dad let me play on the PlayStation for an hour longer. Jules' house is huge, and I spend hours with Gail, exploring it and the surrounding area. Yvette found a school for us to go to tomorrow. I'm not sure I want to go to school again, but Dad said I should. We chatted for about an hour. Then Tommy said his name was called, and we had to say goodbye. I turned off the laptop. Who is Paul? The name Jules seemed familiar to me, but who was he, and who was this Yvette who found my children a school? I decided to call my mom and tell her everything. Dad still didn't speak to me beyond routine politeness, but Mom and I talked for almost an hour. When she asked if I knew who Jules was, I said that the name was familiar to me, but I couldn't remember where. Mom said that all the names sounded French, and if Jim was half French, he might have taken the children to France. If that's the case, then I'll probably never see them again. I told my mother this, and she agreed. When the call ended, I sat and cried until I fell asleep. The next few months were pretty much the same. I talked to Tommy, but Gail still refused to talk to me, and Jim didn't contact me either. Tommy said that he and Gail like their new school and are doing well there. And then, on Wednesday of the following week, there was a knock on the door. I looked through the peephole and saw a man in a gray suit standing on the threshold. I opened the door and asked what he wanted, thinking he was a salesman. "Are you Mrs. Linda Carlyle?" "Yes, how can I help you?" "Mrs. Carlyle, you have been served with court papers." He handed me a large envelope and left. I stood there, not quite understanding what was happening, and then went inside to open the envelope. Inside were divorce papers from Mr. J. Carlyle from Mrs. L. Carlyle, and there was a business card from Jim's lawyer, Miss Jane Wright, asking him to contact her. I called my mom to ask her advice, and she said I needed to hire a lawyer to look over the divorce papers. The next day I went to see a lawyer who advised me to sign the papers since the conditions were very lenient. And if I'm right and Jim actually lives in France, contesting the divorce will be very expensive. Even if a judge orders counseling, there is no way to enforce it. I left the office feeling helpless. I didn't know where they were, and I realized that Jim had probably felt the same way that night. I cried so much that I had to stop because I couldn't see the road and was afraid of causing an accident. On Saturday, everything changed. Mom called me in complete delight. "Linda, I talked to Jim and the kids. He said he wants the kids to keep in touch with their grandparents. Isn't that great?" "Oh, Mom, I'm so happy for you. I knew Jim wouldn't deny you time with the kids. He knows how much they love you and that you love them." "What did they say?" "Jim, 2 months ago. After Tommy video chatted with Linda, he seemed much more cheerful, and I decided to make this a regular activity. I was a little worried that Gail didn't want to communicate with her mother, but I hoped that she would change her mind. We needed a wardrobe update for both the kids and me, so I asked Yvette where the best stores were. She immediately said that she would come with us, since men have no idea what to buy for children, especially girls like Gail. She did not tolerate any objections and went to ask Jules for a day off, which he gladly gave her. He also took me aside. Jim, when a woman decides to take you shopping with her, don't argue. You won't win anyway, just agree with everything she says, and maybe you'll have a chance to survive it. So the next morning we went shopping. Yvette knew all the best places, and since money was no object, we soon realized that we could not carry everything we had bought. Then everything we purchased began to be delivered to our home, along with other purchases. Yvette and Gail were like two sisters, conspiratorial, looking at each other and laughing, when Tommy and I tried not to blush in lingerie stores while they tried on and discussed satin products. Yvette knew a cozy little cafe where we had lunch. Yvette ordered snails and was surprised when I did the same. Tommy and Gail wrinkled their noses and said "you" in unison before ordering a pastry that was absolutely delicious. We spent the whole day shopping and only returned home for dinner. We couldn't miss dinner because Maria, the cook, would be furious. It's better not to joke with a French cook. When we got home, our purchases had already been delivered, and after dinner, Yvette and Gail went to Gail's room to try on everything they bought. Jules, Tommy, and I had to sit and do our respective sighs and ahs while Gail twirled around and showed off her new outfits. The next day, Yvette took me to register the children at school. I said that I was worried about how Tommy and Gail would learn French. Yvette simply laughed and said that we were going to the so-called embassy school, where children from English-speaking countries study. We spent over 2 hours signing them up for school. The school insisted on contacting their previous schools to find out about their academic level. I was glad that they could study in the same school and watch recess. The only thing I didn't like was that when the school contacted their previous schools, our location would become known. Tommy and Gail were supposed to start school next week, Monday. I decided we needed a day off before they went back to school and I went back to work, so I asked them if they wanted to go to the zoo. Of course, they were delighted and said they wanted Yvette to come with us. When I asked her, she simply smiled and said, "Of course." We had a wonderful day at the zoo and left with the obligatory plush toys. The following Sunday, Tommy spoke to his mother again via video call, but Gail still insisted that she would never speak to the woman again. Monday was the kids' first day of school, and Yvette and I drove them, but from that day on Paul would be driving them until I made other arrangements. That evening the children were delighted and wanted to tell Yvette and me about their day. They both seemed to really like school. Tommy sat next to the son of the US embassy employee, and they immediately hit it off. Gail sat next to an English girl whose father worked in British embassy security, and they also got along well. Gail came up to me and asked me to contact my grandparents because she missed them. I kicked myself for not thinking about it myself. If anyone could bridge the gap between Gail and Linda, it would be Sarah. I decided to wait until the children were settled in school before contacting Linda's parents. The next 2 months passed without any problems at school, and I gradually settled into my new job with the help of my predecessor. Now I run the plant on my own, occasionally receiving help. I noticed that Yvette and the kids had become very close and wondered if that was a good thing or a bad thing. I decided to talk to Jules since he knew her better than I did. One evening, after the children had gone to bed and Yvette had gone to her apartment at the back of the shadow, I asked Jules about her. He said she was 30 years old. Although she looked younger, I thought she was about 25. She was the daughter of a friend of his who died in a plane crash, and he took her under his wing. Her mother abandoned them when she was very young, and she doesn't remember her at all. Jules said she rarely dated men after her previous fiancé left her at the altar and devoted herself entirely to her work. He also said that she had taken more vacations in the last 2 months than in all the years they had known each other. He thought she had become attached to me. She's clearly fallen in love with the kids and will be crushed if I take them away. I said it was too early to think about a romantic relationship as I needed to focus on the kids and my new job. Jules said he was sure she would wait. During this time, she and the children will grow closer, and since their mother is absent, Yvette will be able to fill this void. I decided to leave everything as it was and continue to live in the shadow, since the children liked it there, and Jules was glad to hear children's voices in the house. I decided it was time to give the kids a chance to contact their grandparents, so I called Sarah. The phone rang several times, and I was about to hang up when I heard a voice. Jim, is that really you? Hello, Sarah. I thought it was time for you to interact with your grandchildren again, if that's okay. I'm so glad you called. Linda lives only for Sunday conversations with Tommy, and she is very worried that Gail does not want to talk to her. Sarah and I and Yvette tried to get her to talk to her mother, but she won't hear of it. She just calls Linda that woman. I was hoping you could persuade her. Jim, who is Yvette? Have you found Linda's replacement yet? No, nothing like that. She works for my Uncle Jules as his assistant and has taken us under her wing. She took us shopping and was more like a sister to the children, helping us choose clothes for them. She also got them into a new school, which they really like, by the way. She is not trying to replace Linda. She is simply helping the children adapt to their new life. I don't know what I would do without her. If you don't mind, I'll let the kids FaceTime you on Saturday morning. I'll call first so that if Linda is there, they can call later. Jim, this is a great idea. I'm looking forward to it. Jim, is there any chance that you can forgive her? She understands what she has done and is very worried about it. If you had just talked to her, maybe you could have worked things out. If not for her sake, then for the sake of the children. Sarah, we don't have the slightest chance of getting back together. What she did is unforgivable. I don't want to be a cuckold. I just can't live like that. I would feel like less of a man if I forgave her, and she would see it as weakness and despise me for it. No, there is no turning back, only forward. I'll try to figure out how to arrange for you to visit me, Sam and Linda, in the future, but this is the most I'm willing to do. Sam said you would say so, and he agrees with you, but I had to try. I'm looking forward to Saturday, and Sam wants to talk to you too. Bye, and pass on our love to the children. Saturday came, and the children were delighted. Tommy spoke first, then about half an hour later Gail talked to her grandmother for almost an hour. I left them alone because I saw no point in staying. Sarah had already guessed that we live in France. After the kids finished, Sam asked to talk to me, and I sent the kids off to play. Jim, I'm really sorry about what happened. I hope you know that we raised her better. This creep seems to make a habit of seducing other people's wives and then harassing their husbands over the phone. But this time he got involved with the wrong husband, but with you. Thanks to you putting it all on a TV show, a big scandal started, with over a dozen other couples coming forward with accusations, and a hotshot lawyer starting a class action lawsuit against Lavalier. The team fired him when sponsors started leaving. I'll send you the details and the lawyer's number. You might want to join the class action. We talked for a few more minutes and then hung up. I thought about his words and called my lawyer to begin the process. I don't need the money, but any suffering this bastard causes is worth doing. Things calmed down over the next few months, but Gail still refused to talk to that woman, as she called her mother. Even Sarah stopped trying to change her mind when Gail threatened to stop talking to her too. Work consumed all my time as I tried to justify the trust of my boss. When we last spoke, he said he was very pleased with the way I took on the plant. Production increased, the number of sick days decreased, and the union sang my praises. This was due to the fact that I introduced several changes, abandoning the French management style, and began to appear more often on the production floor, asking for the opinions of workers and taking them into account when appropriate. I also increased their vacation days to a level similar to us employees. This had a positive effect. Workers were more satisfied and felt valued by management. As for my personal life, Yvette and I were getting closer. She was often in our company at the Shadow and spent most of her weekends with us. She arranged shopping or planned our leisure time. On rare occasions when I was away on business, Eve took control of my family, playing the role of mother, and the children reciprocated her feelings. One Friday night, we sat as a family watching Frozen for the millionth time, and Tommy snuggled up to Yvette, whom he now called Vetty. The movie ended, and it was time to go to bed. but when she looked at Tommy, he had already fallen asleep. I picked him up from her lap, and as I was about to carry him away, he opened his eyes and said, "Good night, Mommy," and then went back to sleep. We all froze, not believing what had just happened. Gail just stood there, smiling, then leaned over to Vetty, kissed her, and said, "Good night, Mom," and then went to her room laughing. I looked at Yvette, and she was crying quietly. "I'm sorry, Jim. I didn't mean for this to happen, I swear." Then she kissed me on the cheek and left. I stood there with my mouth open, not knowing what to say. Jules looked at me and said, "Now you know what I have suspected for some time. Cherchez la femme." And he also left me standing there like a fool. I carried Tommy to bed and went to my room with a warm, happy feeling in my stomach, a feeling I hadn't felt in years. Linda. I was so glad that the kids kept in touch with my parents, and although Gail didn't talk to me, Mom told me everything she said. At least I felt like I had a third channel of communication with Gail. Tommy was always full of emotion and talked about every word or action. I still didn't like the influence I had on them. Eved, but I was somewhat relieved that she was trying to get Gail to talk to me. Now that I knew they were living in France, I told Sergeant Malone, and she advised me to talk to my lawyer. I made an appointment with him the next day, and he told me that since Jim had dual citizenship, the French authorities would treat the children as partly French and deny extradition, so I was stumped again. In the months that followed, things began to move forward. I sold the house and bought a nice new two-bedroom house in a gated community. Even after taxes and fees, I had over $100K left over, so I didn't have any financial problems in the near future. I decided to look for a job as Jim advised and realized that if I wanted to earn a good living, I needed to get a qualification, so I went back to school. I ignored Jim's other advice. So it was a surprise when I went to the doctor because of a burning sensation when urinating and was told that I had an advanced stage of the disease and was prescribed treatment. I was furious and could have killed Mark for infecting me. The doctor said that he was required by law to report my condition to the Centers for Disease Control and Prevention. I had to fill out a form listing all my sexual partners, and there was only one name on the form. I was hoping that he would be forced to reveal the names of all his partners. I went back to school and decided to take a 2-year evening course in business management and a year's day course in cookery. I had always been a good cook. I was going to support myself by working in the hospitality industry. I got a part-time job as a hostess at a convention center, which also helped with my long-term plans. Jim. Sarah told me that Linda has moved out, gotten a job, and started a new life as a single woman, but isn't dating anyone yet. So if I change my mind, she's still single. I told her not to get her hopes up, and Sarah laughed and said, "A girl can try, can't she?" The weekly FaceTime sessions were going well, and everyone seemed happy with the arrangement, except of course Linda, who was still trying to talk to me and Gail and couldn't figure out how useless it was. Things got a little tense at the Shadow after the night the kids called Yvette Mom. Tommy didn't seem to remember it, but Gail did it on purpose to see what would happen. The school term was coming to an end, and the school organized several school trips that lasted from one night to a whole week. Tommy wanted to go on a tour of the beaches of Normandy. He was starting to get interested in history. Gail wanted to go on a river cruise in Germany on the Danube for 2 weeks and was interested in architecture. Yvette said it would be beneficial for them and broaden their horizons, so I agreed on one condition: they would FaceTime me every night. Gail went first, and Tommy followed a week later. As Yvette and I drove home, the Shadow now feeling like home for all of us, she said she had cooked dinner for the two of us and invited me to dinner. Getting out of the car, she told me to dress casually and not be late. I didn't know what to expect since I'd never been to her apartment before, and I was a little nervous. I knocked on the door 5 minutes before the appointed time, and she let me in. When I walked in, she took my jacket and put it in the closet, then led me into the living room. In the center of the room, there was a round table covered with a white tablecloth, with a place setting and a candle. She invited me to sit on the sofa and said that dinner would be ready soon and asked me not to go into the kitchen. The smell wafting from the kitchen made my mouth water, but I couldn't figure out what it was. She returned to the room with a basket full of fresh rolls and a jug of red wine. I asked what she was cooking, and she said it was a secret and went back to the kitchen. Soon after, she asked me to sit down and pour myself some wine. She came out of the kitchen holding 2 plates, each containing 2 pieces of filet mignon, placed on round slices of rye bread and garnished with fried foie gras and slices of black Périgord truffle, with a side dish of vegetables in a rich sauce. I only found out about it later, when we were already sitting and talking, and I asked what it was called. It turns out it's called Rossini's Tornado, after the composer. I took a careful piece, and the meat literally melted in my mouth. The taste was so rich that it grabbed me like an avalanche. I had never tasted anything like this in my life, and wondered how a mere mortal could create such a dish. Yvette smiled from ear to ear, seeing my reaction. "Did you like it?" "My approval does not matter. This is food for the gods, not for mortal man. Where did you learn to cook like that?" She looked at me as if I was a simpleton and simply said, as if that explained everything, "I'm French." The wine complemented the dish perfectly, a light red Bordeaux, and for dessert there was chocolate mousse, followed by freshly ground black coffee. Yvette put the dishes away, and I helped her with the washing up. She said that French men never offered to help with cleaning, and that it was a refreshing change. Then she kissed me lightly on the cheek. We sat down and had a glass of excellent brandy, and then it was time to leave. We said goodbye with another light kiss, but this time on the lips, and she closed the door. I didn't go back to my room. I was floating on a cloud of happiness. When I returned to my room, I stripped down to my boxers. I never liked boxers, climbed into bed, and fell asleep. I don't know how long I slept when I realized that I was not alone. It was Yvette. We made love. Then she stood up, kissed me, and left. I lay there wondering if this really happened or if I was dreaming. The next day, I didn't know what to say even when we met for breakfast. She just looked at me and smiled, licking her lips. She brought me coffee, kissing me lightly on the cheek, just as Jules entered. "Jules, finally, you two have been walking around each other for weeks. It was obvious to everyone what was going on except you. You need to sort this out before the kids return. Gail will be delighted, but I'm not sure about Tommy." When my car pulled up to take me to work, Eve kissed me goodbye as if we had been married for many years and it was normal. Usually I deal with some work issues on the way to work, but not this morning. I was still in prostration. When I arrived at work, the staff noticed my distraction and good mood, and I heard several of them mutter, "Il est amoureux, he's in love." I tried to concentrate and get things done, but thoughts about the previous night would not leave me. Some of the staff noticed this, and there were small smiles and quiet chuckles everywhere I went. When I got home, it was obvious that the staff at the Shadow knew everything. They all had knowing smiles on their faces, and I couldn't help but blush. Linda. Everything went according to plan. I was settling into a new home. My academic success exceeded all expectations, as my teachers said. At work, I was unexpectedly offered a promotion to supervisor, and now I had 7 women and young girls also working part-time under me. I saw Mark several times, but we never talked. On the other hand, the security guard who saved me when Mark was behaving inappropriately spoke to me several times, and I learned that his name was Mike and he was English. One evening after the wedding reception, while we were cleaning up, Mike helped out, even though it wasn't his job to do so. He came up to me looking a little nervous. "Hey, Mike, what's wrong? You look like someone just stole your drink." "Sorry, I'm just not used to it. I was wondering if you would like to have dinner sometime. I know a good restaurant." I looked at Mike, thinking that scoundrels who knew about my past and thought that I was easily accessible had already tried to seduce me. But looking at Mike, who looked so unsure, I dismissed the thought as unworthy. I liked Mike, but I still loved Jim and hoped that if he would just get together with me, we could get back together. If he found out I was dating Mike, it could complicate things. Then Mike interrupted my train of thought. "Listen, Linda, I know about your past and that you want to get back to Jim. I'm just offering dinner, nothing more, I promise." "Okay, just dinner, and we pay equally, okay? I'm fine with that. When do you want to go? How about Saturday? I don't have classes on Saturdays. Will you pick me up at 8? I wrote my address on a napkin and handed it to him. His face lit up like a neon sign. I hoped that he didn't see more in our meeting than there actually was. I realized that I had just thought of a date as meeting another man. I'm looking forward to it. See you. Saturday came, and I was as nervous as a cat with a long tail in a room full of rocking chairs. As 8 o'clock approached, I thought about calling it all off, but decided to continue because I couldn't bring myself to offend Mike. At exactly 8 o'clock, there was a knock on the door. I looked through the peephole and saw Mike standing there. I opened the door and let him in. He was wearing what looked like an expensive suit, and I wondered how the guard could afford such an expensive suit. I took my coat, and he took my arm and led me to his car. It was a BMW SUV, an expensive car. I wondered again if it was his car or a rental. I hope he didn't spend a fortune renting expensive things to impress me. We arrived at the restaurant, and oh my God, it was one of the most expensive restaurants in the city. When we walked in and the receptionist asked if we had a reservation, I thought Mike would say no and ask if they could accommodate us. But before Mike could answer, the head waiter came up to us and shook Mike's hand. "Mr. Walk, it's nice to see you again and in such company. Please follow me." He led us to the table. I couldn't believe that the security guard had such connections. After the head waiter left, the waiter came over with a menu and took our drink order. I looked at Mike, and he was smiling. I raised my eyebrows in question. "Sorry, Linda, I have something to confess. I'm not really a security guard. Well, I mean I am, but not in the way you think. When you saw me and called for help with Lavalier, I was replacing the guard who was supposed to be there, but fell ill. My brother and I own a security company, and the convention center is one of our clients. Do you forgive me? So why have you kept up this deception all these weeks?" "To be close to you, and I worked up the courage to ask you out. You see, I don't have much dating experience, and I didn't know where to start. I asked my brother Tom, and he said just ask. She might say no, and you can move on. So here I am. Oh, and I don't expect you to pay for dinner here, maybe next time, if there's a next time." "Mike, that's so sweet, but there won't be a next time unless you let me pay for myself. I have enough money. Jim left me in good condition, so you don't have to worry about that. Jim seems to be a very nice person. Tell me about it if you don't mind. You didn't invite me to talk about my ex, so let's talk about you. I know you are English. How did you end up here with your brother?" It's a long story, but if you're really interested, I'll tell you the shortened version. Please, Mike, I'd like to hear. You asked yourself, so here it is. My brother and I come from a family with a long tradition of service to our country. My father was in the army, as was my uncle, so my brother and I joined the Royal Marines after university. In order not to drag out the story, I will say briefly, I was demobilized when I lost my left leg as a result of a wide explosion in Helmand. The difference in walking is almost unnoticeable, and I can even dance as long as it's not too fast. My brother followed me when he was injured and could no longer pass the physical test. Our parents died while we were at university, and since my brother is the eldest, he inherited our family fortune. You see, our family is quite wealthy by British standards. We both decided to sell everything and move to the US to invest our family fortune here. Tom insisted that we share the inheritance, and we started a security company. Tom runs the East Coast branch, and I run the rest, which is actually a smaller branch. Tom married Kim, the nurse who cared for him when he was shot. She was in the medical corps and had a higher rank. Tom was a lieutenant, and she was a captain. Basically, you know the rest. Jim served in the British Army, something to do with aircraft maintenance, as I recall. I wonder what unit he served in. I don't know, he never talked about it, but he had photographs on the wall in his office, one of which he dropped when he left. I can show it to you if you want. I'd like to see that, maybe when I give you a ride home. The rest of the evening was uneventful, and when Mike dropped me off at home, he walked me to the door. made sure I was safe, and left. When I closed the door, I realized that I never showed him the photo, so I took it out and put it on the nightstand by the door so as not to forget. We met twice more at the same restaurant with the same results, but I still didn't show him the photo because I kept forgetting. My parents said they wanted to talk to me when I visited them for Thanksgiving, and I could tell by the look on their faces that the conversation would be unpleasant. Mom, Linda, as you know, we have been in contact with Jim and the children in recent months. The fact is that Jim invited us to go to his place for Christmas. This means we won't be able to meet you for Christmas this year. I hope you understand. Mom, I think this is wonderful. You'll be able to see the kids, give them my love, and maybe talk to Jim and Gail about getting them to start talking to me. Don't worry about me. I have a lot to do. I can handle it. I told Mike I'd be free for Christmas, and he was thrilled. He said that he would go to his brother and invited me to go with him. He must have noticed the look on my face because he quickly added, "Of course, as friends, no bed stuff, I promise." I spoke to Tommy at Christmas, and my parents seemed a little tense when they told me that Gail and Jim still didn't want to talk to me. It didn't hurt me as much as before, but I still cried myself to sleep that night. I had a great time with Mike and his family. Tom and Kim were thinking about having children and asked me if I had some of my own. When I looked down, they apologized and changed the subject. Later that night, when Mike and Tom went into the kitchen to watch a British football match, Kim and I were left alone. She asked me what happened. I wondered how much she already knew. She seemed to read my mind because she said Mike hadn't told her anything about me except that I was just a friend and I needed my own room. Mike and Tom were in the kitchen, so no one could hear us. I looked at Kim and blurted out everything, the whole dirty truth about how I ruined my marriage for a night of passion and how much I now regret it. By the end of my story, I could not hold back my tears, and Kim hugged me and began stroking my back. She took me to my room and sat on the bed next to me. Kim, Linda, I'm so sorry this happened to you, but where is Mike in all of this? I explained how Mike helped me when Mark started harassing me, and she listened to my story with a smile. I also explained that Mike knew everything, and that we were just friends with no expectations who were just enjoying each other's company. Does Mike know that you still hope to restore your relationship with Jim? Yes, I made that clear to him. I want to return to Jim. He means the whole world to me. I'm ready to do anything to earn his forgiveness and get back what we had. Linda, you have to realize that you have almost no chance of this. If I had done to Tom what you did to Jim, we'd both be dead. Jim must be a very special person to leave you with the means to live a comfortable life, but I don't see any chance of reconciliation. You have to be honest with yourself and be willing to let him go. When you do this, Mike will make his move, and he will want to be more than just a friend. When that happens, if you accept him, it has to be for the right reasons, because if you hurt him, you'll have to deal with me and you won't like it. Do you understand what I'm talking about? Be sure of your feelings before you promise Mike anything. You know he's head over heels in love with you, don't you? I know he cares about me, but he didn't even try to kiss me. He was always a real gentleman. Every time we went out somewhere together, I didn't know what to say. Just keep him at a distance until you sort out your feelings. That's all I ask. Now let's join the guys and get really drunk. The night went about as she predicted, and the next morning I had a hangover. At dinner that night, Mike started talking about Jim's time in the military. I remembered that I had put a photo of Jim and his friends in my suitcase to show Mike and suggested we go get it. I brought it down to show Mike, and his reaction was not at all what I expected. He looked surprised and then worried and handed the photo to Tom, who looked like he had seen a ghost. Kim, seeing his reaction, quickly walked up to him and looked at the photo, then at me. Linda, what did you tell Mike about what Jim did in the Army? I think he said something about being an airplane maintenance guy. Why? The three of them looked at the photo again, then back at me, and suddenly seemed to realize something important, and Kim asked with a smile, "Did he, by any chance, tell you something like special air service?" "Yes, exactly. Airplane maintenance," I answered proudly. Linda, have you ever heard the term sass on TV or in the news? Of course I heard. It's something like our green berets, isn't it? Exactly, only better. Your green berets were modeled after the SAS. Linda, SAS stands for Special Air Service. Jim was in the SAS, the UX Elite Special Forces. I sat there, stunned that Jim was a trained killer, and I didn't even know it. Tom asked me to point to Jim in the photo, and when I did, he inhaled sharply. Linda, Mike told you that he served in the Royal Marines, but more than that, he was a commando, another elite unit in the British Army. I also served in the Royal Marines, but in my second year, I was recruited into the SAS. I met your husband, but his name was James Devon back then, and he commanded the deadliest unit in the British Army. He voluntarily took on the most dangerous tasks that others refused. Let me tell you a little story about your husband. He led a group of undisciplined soldiers on long missions behind enemy lines and had a $100,000 bounty on his head. He met and fell in love with a local girl, and they dated for over 6 months. One day, she invited him to meet her parents, but when he arrived, the Taliban were waiting for him. She was married to a Taliban leader and was supposed to seduce Jim and arrange his capture. When he did not return to duty on time, his unit, against orders, began searching for him. His captors kept him alive to collect the reward, but tortured him every day. He was tortured for 6 weeks until his team received information about his whereabouts. He was held in a village sympathetic to the Taliban. His team entered the village, followed by mine, and they found him. When he was released, they brought the woman who had betrayed him and made her kneel before him. She begged for mercy, said that she was forced to betray him, and that she loved him, not her husband. One witness said he killed her and then lost consciousness. The witness later recanted, saying he saw nothing, and the case was dropped when other witnesses swore she was dead when she was found. I spoke to Jim briefly a few weeks later, and he showed no remorse. He was given a medical discharge because his legs were so damaged that he could no longer meet the rigorous physical requirements for service in the SAS. His team was disbanded and the fighters were distributed to other units. That was the last time I saw Jim until today. You and especially Lavalier are incredibly lucky to be alive, but I doubt Lavalier will live much longer. Perhaps you will live because Jim seemed to love you very much. Otherwise, you would already be dead. My main concern is for my brother, who is not to blame for this, but may be caught up in the consequences. I advise you to tell Jim about you and Mike as soon as possible, making it clear that you are just friends, and hope that he is satisfied with this. I sat there, shocked. My Jim was a killer. Not just a killer, but a cold-blooded killer. How could he kill a woman? And then it dawned on me. She betrayed him and betrayed him, just like me. Oh my God, am I next? I began to feel cold, not just cold, but icy, and I began to tremble. Kim noticed what was happening to me, grabbed a blanket, and covered me. Tom, quickly prepare some hot chocolate. She's going into shock. Mike, hold her. If the shaking doesn't stop, we'll need to call 911. The next few minutes were a blur. I drank chocolate and started to feel better, but now I needed to go to the toilet. I tried to get up, told Kim about my problem, and she helped me get to the restroom. Don't close the door, I'll be there. Call me if anything happens. I sat, but nothing happened. I could not go to the toilet. I began to feel dizzy, and a fever engulfed my body. The last thing I remember is calling out to Kim, and then the floor hitting me in the face. Who is? I thought Linda called me, but I wasn't sure. It sounded like a whisper, but I definitely heard a thud, so I went in. Linda was lying on the floor, so I called the guys for help. While I waited, I pulled Linda's panties up to save her the embarrassment. When they came running, I told them to put her on the couch and call 911. I laid her down on the couch, putting pillows under her legs and feet so that the blood would go to her upper body and head. I checked her pulse, and it was a little low at 75 beats per minute, so I took out my first aid kit and took her blood pressure, and it was also low at 112/70. When the paramedics arrived, they took over and gave her oxygen and told her that I did everything right. I explained that I was a nurse in the Army and kept my first aid kit up to date. They thanked me and asked if I wanted to go with her to the hospital. Of course, I agreed. Linda regained consciousness on the way there and asked what happened. I explained that she had gone into shock, causing her blood pressure to drop dramatically and her body to shut down. She was kept in hospital overnight and released the next day. Linda, when Mike picked me up from the hospital, I was still feeling a little unsteady, but I didn't tell the doctor because I wanted to go home. Mike said I gave them a real scare when I fainted and that it was lucky Kim knew what to do. I apologized, but Mike just brushed it off, saying it was a typical Christmas, and that made me laugh. When we got back to Tom and Kim, I apologized again and thanked Kim for saving my life. She said that I was not in real danger, since the doctors would have saved me anyway. She just saved them some time. After dinner that night, Mike and I boarded the plane home, and Mike walked me to the door. I thanked him for a wonderful Christmas and apologized again. He kissed me on the cheek and left. I wondered if I would ever see him again because I had put his life at risk. I barely slept that night, imagining every little noise as an assassin sent by Jim to kill me. I ended up falling into a restless sleep, holding the small .32 caliber pistol Jim had bought me. I met my parents at the airport. They seemed happy to see me, but were a little standoffish. When I asked them about it, they said it was just due to jet lag. When they asked me how my Christmas was, I said I had a great time, but didn't mention Jim or my reaction to his past. I took them home and promised not to be late for dinner on New Year's Day. I arrived at my parents' house around 11:30, and my dad came out to meet me, saying that my mom was in the kitchen. Dad followed me and Mom handed me mulled wine. I was staying overnight, so I didn't have to worry about drinking and driving, but both parents seemed a little nervous, and I wondered why. Lunch and dinner went smoothly, then Mom said we would FaceTime the kids later. This significantly lifted my mood, since I had been feeling the tension from my parents' mood all day. When the time came, Dad opened his laptop, and we waited for the notification of an incoming call. About 10 minutes later, the notification arrived. Mom spoke first and interacted with Tommy and then with Gail. I cried listening to my daughter talk so openly to her mother, although she did not want to talk to me. Then Dad took the floor, and then it was my turn. Tommy and I talked for about 15 minutes, and as we were saying goodbye, I heard a voice in the background say that he wanted to talk to me. I almost fainted. It was Gail, and I was so happy that my little girl finally decided to talk to me. "Hey baby, I missed you so much. Thank you for finally talking to me. It means so much to me. How are you?" "Hello, Mom, and this is the last time I call you that. From now on, you are Linda to me. If you have a problem with this, I will hang up immediately." "Okay, baby, if this is how it has to be, I'll live with it. But tell me everything that's happened since you left." "I will talk to you on one condition. If you can satisfactorily explain why you destroyed our family and almost killed Dad." "What do you mean, almost killed Jim?" "Dad doesn't know this, but I saw him sitting on the bed with your gun in his hands, and I understood what he was thinking about. Then he looked at the photo of us as a family on your chest of drawers and put the gun away. He almost ended up doing it because of you. Now explain why you did what you did, and it should be a really compelling explanation." I was already crying. "Baby, I can't explain. I don't know why I did it. All I know is that I have regretted it ever since, and I am heartbroken for the pain I caused all of you. I can only beg for your forgiveness and ask for a chance to make things right. Just give me a chance." "It's not enough, Linda. When you understand why you did it, maybe then we can talk again, but not before. Goodbye, Linda." I sat there with my face streaked with tears, wondering how I would ever get my daughter back, let alone Jim. As I sat there, my mother said, "Jim wants to talk to you now." I wasn't sure I heard her correctly, and I looked at her hopefully. She just handed me the laptop, and there on the screen was Jim. I almost fainted, feeling very dizzy. "Jim?" "Yes, Linda, it's me. We need to talk." "Oh God, Jim, I've been wanting to talk to you since that night to try to explain myself. I just wasn't myself. I don't know what came over me. I was so stupid, so sure that you would forgive me, so sure of your love for me that you would understand and take me back. Linda, that's enough. I'm not here to try to repair our relationship. That ship sailed when you gave yourself to another man. I need to talk to you so you can understand why we can never be together again. When you secretly left with Lavalier, you broke something in me that could never be fixed, and that was my trust in you. You were my whole life. I loved you unconditionally until the moment you broke my heart. Indeed, I thought about death, but the responsibility for my children outweighed everything else. If I killed myself, the children would be raised by a woman of easy virtue and her boyfriend. You'd get everything you wanted, kids, all the money, a house, and your boyfriend to spend it on. But that's how I got my comeuppance. You still have a house, but you only have a little money, and you have to work to get what you want. I know Mark abandoned you as soon as he could, and I took revenge on him by ruining his career. When I looked at the screen, I saw Jim quietly crying, and my heart broke. I almost killed my husband and lost my children, and then I said something stupid. But Jim, I still love you, and it was just one night. Can't we get over it and move on? I thought you'd already moved on with Mike. Damn, he knew about Mike, but did he know everything? It's true, Jim, I saw Mike, but we're just friends. We didn't even kiss. I swear on my life, Jim, nothing happened. I haven't moved on. I still want you back in my life. Please, Jim, can't we meet and sort this out? There's nothing to understand here, Linda. You say you didn't move on, but I did. When we arrived at my uncle's estate, I was a broken man clutching at straws. I didn't know what to do next. My life had collapsed, and I was in a state of uncertainty. I had 1 month to get myself together before I started my new job. The kids needed a new school, and everything we had fit in 2 suitcases. Jules realized my condition and immediately introduced me to his assistant Yvta. She took charge and settled the children into their own rooms, one on either side of mine. Over the next few weeks, she got them into a good school that catered to foreign diplomats, took them shopping, and became a big sister to Gail. She took my hand and helped me gather my thoughts, taking charge of our lives until I came to terms with my new role as a single father. I relied on her more and more, and as a result, we grew closer. It was only after our divorce became final that we admitted that we had fallen in love and had our first kiss. I know you think she took advantage of me, but she didn't. If it weren't for her insistence that the children contact you and your parents, we wouldn't be having this conversation. The point of this conversation is that I invited Yvta to become my wife, and she agreed. I still love you, but not as much as before. I no longer hate you, and the desire for revenge has passed, but I can never forgive you for what you did. If we got back together, I would constantly doubt what you were doing and with whom. This is no way for a married couple to live, and it would destroy us within a few years. So let Mike into your heart, but never disrespect him like you did me. Love him with all your heart and move on. Then I felt like my life had completely collapsed, and my dad had to take me away and put me to bed. I was crying so hard. Jim. When Sam took Linda away, Sarah took her place. Thank you, Jim. I know it wasn't easy, and you tried to soften the blow, and we appreciate that. Will you continue to communicate with Sam and I, and will we be able to continue to FaceTime with the kids? Of course, Sarah, nothing has changed. We just needed to clear things up. I'll talk to you next Sunday. Goodbye. We set the wedding for June, and Yvta and I went on a cruise for our honeymoon. We invited Sam and Sarah, but they declined, saying they didn't think it was appropriate. The next 2 years flew by. Gail turned 18 and wanted to study law to become a lawyer in France. Gail loved France and wanted to become a French citizen. Yvta will help her with this in due time. Tommy is now 16 and wanted to go to the USA to visit his grandparents and his mother. Gail said she would go with him, but would refuse to meet Linda. Linda and Mike got married 6 months ago and seem to be happy. I'm happy for her and Mike, but I still have warm feelings for Linda, and I wanted her to be happy. Last year, the case against Lavalier was finally closed and compensation payments were made. We all received $1.3 million. I invested my money in a trust fund for the children, which they will receive when they are 25. I heard that Linda has invested in starting her own culinary business, and it is thriving. At work, the planned plants were now operational, and I was the regional manager responsible for France, Germany, and the UK. I had a fancy new office, and I got to travel a lot. Evta usually accompanied me and went shopping while I was at meetings. She no longer worked for Jules as a personal assistant, but trained her replacement. There was also a regional manager for Japan, Korea, and the USA. My income tripled, and we were planning to buy our own house, but Jules said he wanted us to stay as he was used to having family around. We discussed his proposal and agreed to stay with him indefinitely, which made Tommy very happy, since he was now dating one of the servants' daughters. Linda and I occasionally communicated without mutual reproaches, and during one of these conversations on FaceTime, I told her that Gail and Tommy were going to spend the summer vacation with her parents. I said that I didn't mind her seeing the kids, and that I asked Tommy if he would like to stay with his mother for part of that time if she didn't mind. Linda immediately burst into tears and could not speak for a while. Mike appeared on the screen looking very angry and was ready to tell me off for upsetting his wife, but Linda stopped him. She explained that the reason for her tears was the offer to meet Tommy, and Mike apologized, saying that he would be happy to host Tommy for a few weeks. I called Tommy into the room and told him what had been said. He was delighted and began talking to his mother. I left them and went to look for Evta. She sat in the kitchen with a worried expression on her face. I thought it was because I was returning to the States to attend my company's formal dinner and dance, and that I was supposed to be there with my wife. The company sponsored a charity event for us war veterans. The rest of the regional managers, as well as the general director, also had to be there. It was made clear that if we served in the army, we were expected to wear our old uniforms as a sign of respect. All this was supposed to take place on Veterans Day, November 11th. I thought that Evta was concerned that I might meet Linda, forgive her, and resume the relationship. I tried to explain that it would never happen, and she laughed and said she wasn't worried about it. So I asked what was bothering her. She looked a little nervous and handed me what looked like a small plastic thermometer. I looked at it, and the clear window showed a blue marker on the positive end. I turned it over and saw the inscription, "Pregnancy Test." I looked at Evta, and she looked scared. I think she was afraid that I would be angry. I pulled her close and kissed her, then started crying with happiness. We stood there for what seemed like an eternity, both crying with happiness. "Aren't you mad at me?" "How can I be angry with you? You just made me the happiest person in the world. How long have you known this?" "Just today, I was afraid that you would come home and be angry. We need to go to the doctor and confirm this. We'll go tomorrow. Today, just take me to bed and make love to me." The next day, I literally soared with happiness, called work, canceled all meetings for the day, and took the day off. Being a boss is great. Then I made an appointment with our family doctor. The doctor said that Evta is in her 6th week and that she is fine. I asked if it would be okay if Evta came with me to the US in 4 months, and he said that as long as there were no complications, it would be okay. Tommy and Gail went on summer vacation to their grandparents. Gail used this time to catch up with her old friends. Tommy spent the first week with his grandparents, then met his mother and spent the next 3 weeks with her. I insisted that they return a week early so they could adjust before the school year started. They both said they had a great time, but Gail still refused to talk to her mother and would go to her room when she showed up. The week the charity event was supposed to take place, Evta and I, who already had a noticeable baby bump, went to visit Linda's parents. Then I learned that Linda would also be there for 2 reasons. First, she was in charge of the catering, and second, Mike and Tom also had to be there in uniform as veterans. I offered Evta the opportunity to refuse, but she didn't want to hear about it. She said, "Besides, I've never seen you in a uniform," and that was the end of the discussion. Sam and Sarah were also going to the event, since Sam was a veteran, but they went with friends from the local Veterans Society. The event was scheduled to begin at noon with a special auction of items donated by local businesses and wealthy families. Our company donated a Hockney painting that was expected to generate over $400,000, and our CEO was to present it to the winner. Evening dinner was supposed to start at 6 p.m. The event was formal. Guests were announced at the entrance. The announcement was official. The presenter called the guest's title, if there was one, then his name, rank, and regiment. Then the name of the guest's companion and his status were announced. For the first time in almost 20 years, I was in my uniform, and I was proud that it still fit me perfectly. I kept fit by running in the mornings and going to the gym 3 times a week, and I also attended a local dojo with a mixed martial arts instructor. As I walked down the stairs at my former in-law's house, Eva took a sharp breath, causing both Sam and Sarah to look at me. Sam was the first to react. "Jesus, Jim, you didn't say you were in the SAS. You kept it a secret." Sarah simply covered her mouth and looked shocked. When I approached them, Eva threw herself into my arms. "My dear, you look so elegant in your uniform. I will have to drive women away from you with a stick. You never told me about your service. I want to know everything." Sam asked what all my awards meant, and I said I'd tell him later. Sarah came up to me, hugged me, and whispered in my ear, "Linda was such a fool. I'm so sorry." Sam and Sarah left before us because they had to pick up an old soldier from the veterans' home. Eva and I arrived at the place and stood in line to be announced. I noticed that several people were looking at me, pushing their friends and pointing at my white beret with a winged dagger. While we were waiting, a soldier in a green beret approached us and asked to shake my hand, saying, "You don't remember me, but I remember you. I was captured and about to be executed when your team broke in. I've never been so happy to see someone in my life, and I want to take this opportunity to thank you personally." Then he extended his hand to me, and we shook hands as friends and brothers in arms. "If you ever need anything, just tell me." He gave me his business card. Brothers in arms. We go where others are afraid to go. Address and phone number. I thanked him, and he returned to his companion. "It's our turn to be announced. Please welcome Mr. James Carlyle, former lieutenant in Her Majesty's Special Air Service, and his wife, Eva Carlyle." We walked down the stairs to the curious gazes of most of those present, all conversation stopping as we were shown to our table. We sat down at the table with the rest of our company. As we sat down, our CEO, Chris Watkins, said we made an adorable couple. Then he made a remark to me. "You could have warned me that you were a member of the deadliest regiment in the world. The rest of us don't have uniforms to wear, and we look out of place sitting next to you." He said this with a smile and shook his head. The waiter came over and took our order, and while we waited, I looked around to see if I could spot Linda. She was sitting at a round table with her husband and another couple. I immediately recognized her husband's uniform. It was the uniform of a lieutenant in the Royal Marines. I also recognized another man, Tom Walker, a fellow SAS member, or as the soldiers called us, Rupert, whom I had met earlier when he supported my unit during my rescue. He saw me looking at him, nodded at me, and I nodded back. Now I realized that he and Linda's husband were related, and I wondered how much he had told them about me. Looking around again, I was surprised and happy to see Mark, the bastard Lavalier, and several of his friends at another table. The event was so large that it was impossible to serve everyone at once, so some of the guests had already finished dinner while others were still waiting. I pointed Linda out to Eva and told her that she was in charge of catering that evening. "Eva, your ex-wife is very beautiful. If we weren't married, I might be jealous. Are you going to introduce me to her? Why do you want to meet her? It's always good to know your enemies, isn't it? We are no longer enemies. You took care of that. She is nothing to me. You have no reason to be jealous. You are the only one I look at, and you know it." "My dear, I'm just teasing you," said in her best French accent. And she squeezed my hand for convincing. "Linda, I was sitting with Mike, Tom, and Kim when the MC announced Jim's arrival. Most conversations stopped and people started looking in his direction. The same thing happened when Tom was announced earlier. It seems that the aura of SAS mystique was transmitted to those around him. The four of us watched Jim and Eve to go down the stairs. Tommy and my parents told me how beautiful she was, but I wasn't ready for the reality. I was able to suppress a sigh, but my hand flew up to my mouth. She was by far the most beautiful woman I had ever seen. Even with a little belly, she was still gorgeous. Compared to her, I looked like an ordinary girl next door. I didn't stand a chance. We watched as they walked over to their desk, and as Jim sat down, he took off his beret and clipped it under his badge strap facing forward. He did it without thinking, as if he did it every day, and I was reminded again how lucky I was to be alive. I kept sneaking glances at Jim and Evta, hoping no one would notice, and suddenly Jim caught my eye and simply nodded, then turned away. My heart sank and I felt guilty because now I was married to someone else. Jim was talking to the men at his table, none of whom were in uniform. Jim got up and went somewhere, and then I noticed that Evta was coming towards me with a determined look. When she arrived at our table, Tom and Mike stood up to greet her. Introductions were made, and Evta sat down next to me. "Hi, Linda. It looks like we have a common connection, you were, and I am the wife of the same man. If it weren't so obvious that you adore your husband, I might be jealous because of your beauty and grace. I think it's time you and Jim cleared the air and become friends again. So I sat here so Jim would have no choice but to join me." He was already tired of talking about business with the businessmen at our table, and their wives had not yet tried to start a conversation with me. I thought that by joining you and your company, I would make the evening more interesting for both of us. We could talk about kids and family matters, and the guys could reminisce. If everyone doesn't mind? She looked around the table, and everyone silently agreed. She had charmed everyone with just a few short phrases. She extended her hand to mine and squeezed it, saying, "I hope we can be friends and not let a little thing like divorce come between us. We French know a thing or two about Cupid and the heart." We continued talking for a while, waiting for Jim to return. When he returned, he looked around for Evta, and when he noticed her at our table, he shrugged and walked over. He stood behind Evta, put his hands on her shoulders, and said, "When a French woman decides something, don't try to convince her, I know. Since my wife has decided to join you, may I sit too?" Everyone silently agreed, and I sat down. "Jim." I returned from the toilet and was stopped by two soldiers in green berets. One of them was the same man whom I had met earlier, the second I did not know, and he was introduced to me as his brother. Although I wanted to return to my desk, it was not at all for the sake of communicating with other representatives of our company. Conversations there had already dried up, and it was difficult for us to find topics for communication. I didn't want to leave Evta alone in such an environment, so, apologetically, I said goodbye to two new acquaintances and returned to my table. When I was almost there, I realized that I didn't see Evta and experienced a moment of déjà vu, quickly looking back towards Lavalier's table. I was instantly relieved to see Lavalier sitting and talking to his friends, who all looked like football players. I immediately felt shame for doubting Evta even for a moment, and I realized how deeply Linda had hurt me. I looked for Evta and saw her sitting with Linda and her group, as if they were old friends. I approached them, not knowing what to say, and heard the end of Evta's sentence. She was right, and it was truly time to end this story. I put my hands on Evta's shoulders and asked permission to join their table. In response, Kim pulled a chair between herself and Evta, and I sat down. All eyes were directed at me, expecting me to say something. I addressed the entire table. "Everyone here knows the story of my breakup with Linda, so I won't reopen old wounds. Linda, you hurt me beyond words, and in my anger, I took your children from you. I'm not sure which of us suffered more. You already apologized to me. Now it's my turn. I'm sorry I took your children away. There might have been a better way to get back at you, but I couldn't find it then. I tried to convince Gail to reconnect with you, but she's just as stubborn as you. Evta and I will continue to work on this, and I hope that over time we can achieve success. Tommy is different. He feels torn between us. I'm going to let him decide which parent he wants to live with. If he chooses me, I will do my best to make sure he spends most of his holidays with you. And if he chooses you, I hope you will do the same. This tragedy has dragged on for too long. You and I must bury the hatchet, Linda. I forgive you and wish you and Mike a long and happy life together." Linda jumped to her feet and ran towards me, hugging me. She tried to say something, but her sobs prevented her from doing so, but I understood everything. Eva put her hand on my thigh and squeezed it, expressing her approval. Mike extended his hand to me, and we shook it like new friends. I looked at my new friends and said, "There is only one thing left to do to complete this story," and I looked at Lavalier sitting at his desk. I think everyone thought I was going to kill him when I stood up. Eva grabbed my hand to stop me, but Kim held her back, saying, "Don't try to stop him, he has to do it." As I headed towards the bar, I heard Eva crying, but I had to do it and get my pride back as a man. I ordered a bottle of beer and headed to Lavalier's table. I stopped, looked at him, and said, "Hi, you probably don't remember me. We met a few years ago, and I came to fulfill a promise." "No, I don't remember you. Who are you, and what do you need?" "A few years ago, you did me a favor. You stole my wife from a nightclub and showed me what an unfaithful, lying, worthless piece of trash she is. You sent me an email with the photos, and I sent you a reply thanking you for exposing my wife as a woman of easy virtue. I said if we ever meet, I'll shake your hand and buy you a beer. So here's my hand and here's the beer." I extended my hand to him, and we shook it. He looked at me with a smug expression on his face, but his friends looked nervous. I put the bottle on the table and said, "Enjoy. Since you don't remember me, I'll refresh your memory. Remember when you finished with my wife and were about to take her home, there were a lot of journalists at your gate. So that was me. And when you brought her home and there were reporters there too, it was me too. I also arranged for the TV show Celebrities Behaving Badly to do a special about you and your escapades with married women. You see, I was grateful to you for exposing my wife, but I was angry that you hurt my children, who had to grow up without a mother. Also, guess who paid for the lawyer who started the class action lawsuit that took half of your wealth? Basically, it's my fault that you got kicked off your team and the top teams in the NFL, and that's why you're sitting around with a bunch of second-rate players drinking cheap wine. You ruined my marriage, so I ruined your life. Have a nice day." He sat there with steam coming out of his ears as I walked away, having made my first mistake. When I walked away, I heard a cry. "No, Mark." I turned around and Mark was almost upon me. There was a fight. There was complete silence in the hall. Then chaos began. 5 of Mark's friends decided to take revenge and moved towards me, deciding to beat me up. They suddenly stopped when they saw Tom, Mike, and the 2 Green Berets I had talked to earlier standing next to me. They decided it was better to retreat than to fight and returned to their table. Kim took charge and began issuing orders. Linda cried and said it was all her fault, and Mike tried to calm her down. Eva was as angry as I had ever seen her before. She screamed at me that I was a fool, and that I had risked my life to prove myself right, and nearly made our unborn child an orphan. Kim stood next to her and calmly said, "Eva, don't be mad at Jim. He did what anyone would do to a red-blooded man. He needed to get his alpha male status back from that piece of shit. He actually showed restraint. He could have killed Mark, but he chose to spare him because he didn't want you to see him as a killer. He needed to confront Mark and humiliate him in front of everyone. It was Mark who began to show aggression, not Jim. There are things you need to know about Jim, but I'm not the one who should tell you them. You'll have to ask Jim." I heard everything, but it seemed distant, as if they were not talking about me. I remember they put me on a stretcher and took me to the ambulance. Eva held my hand. The last thing I remember was Linda crying. I was sitting in the car, and the driver behind me kept honking his horn. I looked at the traffic light, and it was still red, so what's the problem? I thought that I was tired of this, so I decided to get out of the car, but I could not move. I was fastened, and the more I tried to free myself, the louder the signal sounded. I suddenly realized that someone was holding me, and that the signal was the car next to my bed. I stopped resisting and looked around. I saw that it was Eva who was holding me back. "Jim, I'm sorry if I hurt you, But the doctor said you shouldn't move, so they tied you down. I'll call the nurse. They want to know when you'll wake up." I tried to answer, but all that came out of my throat was a wheeze. At that moment, the nurse came in and gave me a piece of ice to suck on. She quickly checked my vital signs and released me from the restraints. "You should feel better now. Just don't move. I'll call the doctor. He'll be here soon. Now just lie still." I sucked on a piece of ice, which was better than any malt whiskey at that moment. While I was sucking it, I looked around the room and was surprised to see Linda sitting in a chair, sleeping. I looked at Evda and raised my eyebrows in question. "She's barely left your bed since you got here. I think she still cares about you deeply. Please be kind when she wakes up." "I know I got shot, but why all the fuss? I've been shot before, and it was worse than this." "Jim, you almost died. It was Kim who noticed that you were in very bad condition. When the first ambulance arrived, they were going to take Lavalier first, but Kim ordered them to take you first. She must have been a great officer. She scared the hell out of the paramedics, and they just did as they were told. She called ahead and got the trauma team in the operating room, and that's what saved your life. We are indebted to this woman." We continued talking for a while before Linda woke up. "Jim, are you awake? How do you feel? You really scared us all." "I think I'm okay now, thanks to Mike and Kim Mike for warning me and Kim for saving my life. By the way, does Mike mind that you're here with your ex-husband? Shouldn't you be with him?" "Everything is fine. Mike said I could stay until you're out of danger. I'll call him now so he can pick me up. I'm so glad everything will be fine with you. Call me when you get out of here, and we'll have a celebration dinner." Then she leaned over the bed, kissed my forehead, and left. The doctor discharged me after 2 days, saying that I needed to be careful for the next 2 weeks. We actually had that dinner and became good friends. I won't say that there was no awkwardness, but we managed to smooth it out. I asked if anyone knew what happened to Lavalier and was told that he was still in the hospital in the prison ward awaiting trial. 7 years later. We all see each other from time to time and have dinner together, avoiding talking about the past. Gail still refuses to talk to her mother and is now married to Pierre, a policeman from Paris. They just celebrated the birth of their daughter and named her Evda. Evda, of course, is delighted, but Linda could not hold back her tears when she heard about this, and she had to leave the room. I motioned for Mike to follow her, but he said I'd better go myself. He's a great guy and never gets jealous, so I followed Linda outside. She stood and cried when I approached her. When I hugged her for the first time since that evening, she turned and buried her face in my chest, sobbing for the next 10 minutes. Then she looked at me and smiled. "I really ruined everything, didn't I? If I could go back and do it all over again, I would tell Laval to go to hell. I really love Mike and will do anything to make him happy, but I often wonder what would have happened." "Linda, yes, you ruined everything, but you have a second chance, so take it. I'll talk to Gail again, but I'm not sure it will do anything, but I'll try." Linda gave me a friendly kiss on the cheek, and we went back inside. Evta gave birth to a 9 pounds 2 ounces baby boy, and he is the light of my eyes now that Gail and Tommy are adults. Tommy went to university in England, studied engineering, and graduated with honors, and then surprised us all by joining the army. He is now a lieutenant in the Royal Engineers and currently serving in the Middle East. Gail, Evta, and Linda are so worried about him that they could get an ulcer. Tom, Mike, and I constantly tell them that he works away from the fighting, and in the end, what will be will be. Tommy tries to split his holidays equally between Linda and me. Unlike his sister, he never took sides and remained neutral. I wonder if he will change his mind when he gets married. After I was shot, the police charged Laville with 2 counts of attempted murder, and I sued him for assault. He received 2 15-year sentences, running consecutively, and I received $5 million in compensation, so we both got what we deserved. I truly believe that Linda would not cheat on me again, but the trust was lost. I hope she lives a long and happy life with Mike. I know that Evta and I will live. Subscribe to our channel so that your love doesn't cheat on you, and go ahead and listen to the next story, because this story is nothing compared to the next one. If you're under 18, don't even think, click to the next one.